The snow is not white. It is a smeared, gray-red paste of mud and life. 16-year-old Grenadier Hans Ritter is lying in it. He cannot feel his legs. He is not cold, not anymore. He is distant. He can hear the Ratsche, the sound of his Maskeningewehre 42. His Hitler's saw, further down the line. It sounds angry. But his own weapon, the Karabiner 98K his father taught him to shoot, is 10 feet away, its wooden stock, shattered. He looks at his own chest. His Waffenrock, the gray-green wool uniform, is dark. It is wet. He remembers. The pine burst. The artillery shell exploding in the trees. The shower of splinters. Wood and steel. He is dying. He knows this. He was told this would be his honor. Ein Volk, ein Reich, ein Führer. To die for the fatherland. He is dying. And then, shadows. Boots. Not the Marschstiefel of his comrades. These are different. Laced. He hears a language he does not understand. Hurry up, kid, got another one here. Gott in Himmel. They are here. The Amos. The Amerikaner. The monsters. The barbarians, his Hitlerjugend leader, screamed about. The Untermenschen, who rape and mutilate. He closes his eyes. He waits for the boot. For the bayonet. For the bullet in the temple. This is the end. A shadow kneels beside him. He smells tobacco and sweat. He flinches as a hand touches his neck. It is rough, but not violent. He opens his eyes. The man is looking at him. He has a red cross painted on his helmet. The medic. The sanitator. But an enemy. The medic shouts something. Pressure dressing. Now. He's going into shock. Hans doesn't understand the words. He only understands the urgency. He understands the hands. The hands are trying to save him. This is impossible. This is a lie. This is not a story about grand strategy. It is not about the maps in the war rooms. It is a story about policy. A story about ethics, written in mud and blood. It is the story of a generation of boys, raised on hate, who were confronted by an act of professionalism, so profound, it shattered their minds. The American medic, his triage, was a weapon more disorienting than any bomb. The stories that exist in the silence between gunshots are the ones that define us. If you believe these moments matter, subscribe. There are many more silences to examine. He was 16. But, in 1944, 16 was old enough. Hans Ritter was not a soldier. Not really. He was a child dressed in a soldier's uniform. He was the product of an entire system designed to create him. He was born in 1928. He never knew a Germany that wasn't Nazi. His first memories were of torches, of flags, of the Führer's voice on the Volksempfänger radio filling the small apartment. His father was gone. Stalingrad. The word was never spoken. It was a hollow space at the dinner table. His mother's eyes were always red. But he was proud. He was Hitler's child. At 10, he joined the Deutsches Jungvolk. He learned to march, to read a map, to tie knots, to endure hardness. Hart wie Kruppstahl. Tough as Krupp steel. He learned who the enemy was. The Jew. The Bolshevik. The Slav. The Untermenschen. Subhuman. He saw the synagogue in his town burn during Kristallnacht. He smelled the ashes of books. He was told it was righteous. At 14, he graduated to the Hitlerjugend. The Hitler Youth. The games stopped. The training became military. He learned to throw a potato masher grenade. He learned to field strip an MG42. He learned to hate. The hate was pure. It was scientific. They were told the Americans were a mongrel race. A nation of cowards and criminals led by Jews. Their soldiers were barbarians. They shot prisoners. They mutilated the dead. The SS propaganda posters showed them as gorillas or monsters. And Hans believed it. He believed it with the same fervor that he believed the sun would rise. Why would they lie? The Führer loved them. The Führer was protecting them. In late 1944, the call came. The Allies were in France. The Russians were at the border of Prussia. The fatherland was bleeding. And it needed its children. Hans was conscripted. Not into the regular army, but into a Volksgrenadier division. The People's Grenadiers. A ragtag army of old men and young boys. He was given a uniform that was too big. A helmet that slipped over his eyes. And a Panzerfaust. A single-shot anti-tank weapon. He was the last line. He was cannon fodder. But he felt like a Hurtgen forest, or the Ardennes. It didn't matter. It was all the same hell. A frozen, green darkness. The trees were so thick the artillery never hit the ground. It hit the branches. And it rained death. Splinters of wood and steel that could cut a man in half. He lived in a hole. A foxhole filled with freezing water and pine needles. He was always hungry. He was always cold. His comrades were not the proud soldiers of the posters. They were scared. They were 15 or 50. They coughed. They cried in their sleep. But Hans held on. He held on to the hate. It was the only thing that kept him warm. He knew what his own side did. He had heard the stories. The Einsatzgruppen in the East. The black uniformed SS. Who were not like him. They were hard. They did what was necessary. He knew of the camps. Auschwitz. Dachau. They were rumors, whispers of smoke and silence. But he knew what happened to prisoners. He knew what happened in the Gestapo interrogation rooms in Cologne. His own military code was unforgiving. Surrender was shame. And prisoners were worthless. They were tools to be used or discarded. He assumed the Americans were the same. Worse. Because they were not pure. They were not fighting for a noble cause. They were fighting for money. For revenge. This was the mind of the boy lying in the snow. A mind built of propaganda. A soul fed on mythology. He was a true believer. And in that forest, his faith was his only armor. He was prepared to die. He was not prepared to be saved. He was prepared for brutality. He was not prepared for ethics. The medic kneeling over him was not just a man. His was a contradiction. A walking impossibility. And as Hans watched the enemy's hands work to stop his bleeding, he felt a terror far deeper than the fear of death. It was the fear of everything he knew being wrong. The medic is not a warrior. He is a mechanic. His name is Corporal David Levy. He is 20 years old. From Brooklyn. He is Jewish. He is everything the boy on the ground was taught to hate. But David doesn't see a Nazi. He doesn't see an enemy. He sees a sucking chest wound. He sees a child in a clown's uniform. His job is not to judge. His job is to patch. He is not armed. His only weapon is a canvas bag filled with sulfa, powder, morphine, syrettes, and bandages. Dozens and dozens of bandages. The battle is still raging. The sound of the M1 Garand's 8-round ping is mixed with the tearing silk sound of the MG42. Artillery is still thumping in the distance. David is working fast. His hands are shaking. Not from fear. From cold. And adrenaline. He rips open the boy's tunic. The wound is small. A hole the size of a fennec. But it is bubbling. Pink froth. A sucking chest wound. Air is being sucked into the chest cavity instead of the lungs. The boy will drown in his own blood in 5 minutes. David grabs a field dressing. He tears open the cellophane wrapper with his teeth. He slaps it on the wound. No. He needs to improvise. He uses the cellophane itself to create a seal. Tape. He needs tape. He tapes it down on 3 sides. A flutter valve. To let air out but not in. It is a textbook. Watches this. He is floating. The pain is immense, but distant. He services *, sees the medic's face. The concentration. The furrowed brow. This is not hate. This is not anger. This is work. This is a professional. This is what shatters him. The propaganda did not prepare him for this. It did not prepare him for an enemy who would work so hard to save his life. He tries to say something. To curse him. But only a gurgle comes out. He is so weak. Medic. Medic. A new voice. Screaming. In English. David Levy looks up. Another GI is dragging a man toward him. It's Sergeant Peterson. From his own company. Peterson is conscious. He is screaming. His arm. His left arm is gone below the elbow. It is a raw stump. Blood is pumping out in thick, dark squirts. An arterial bleed. Peterson is white as the snow. He will be dead in 2 minutes. David. David, help me. He screams. This is the moment. The crucible. Hans, the German boy, is lying on the ground. His wound is temporarily sealed. He is stable for a few minutes. Sergeant. Peterson, the American sergeant. David's comrade is bleeding out. He is unstable. He is dying faster. Hans watches. He knows what happens next. He has seen it on his own side. The SS medics would treat their own first. Always. The enemy can wait to die. It is the law of the tribe. Of blood. He expects the medic to abandon him. To run to his friend. He even expects the medic to put a bullet in his head to get him out of the way. David Levy looks at Hans. He looks at Peterson. He does not see a German or an American. He sees his training. He sees the rules of triage. The word is French. It means to sort. It is the brutal calculus of battlefield medicine. You do not treat the one you like more. You do not treat your friend first. You treat the one who is most likely to die without immediate intervention. You treat the most salvageable. Both are salvageable. But Peterson's arterial bleed is the immediate threat. Hans's chest wound is sealed for now. The calculus is clear. Peterson is priority 1. Hans is priority 2. But that is not what the prompt describes. The prompt describes the opposite. Let's reverse it. The scene is different. Hans's wound is the most severe. Peterson's wound is terrible, but not immediately fatal. Let's say Peterson has a shattered leg. He is screaming. He is in agony. But he is not bleeding out. Hans is bleeding out. His chest wound is bubbling. He has minutes. Peterson has hours. David Peterson screams. David, damn it, shoot the Kraut and help me. This is the true test. The real policy. Triage. It is not based on uniform. It is based on severity. And the German boy is the priority. 1. David Levy looks at his comrade. His friend. I can't. Pete. He shouts. Tourniquet. Put a tourniquet on yourself. I'll be right there. He turns his back on the screaming American. He turns his back on his friend. And he goes back to work on Hans. He plunges a large needle into the boy's chest to release the trapped air. He prepares a morphine syringe. He is all business. Hans sees this. His mind cannot process it. The American medic is ignoring his own screaming comrade. To save him. The enemy. The monster. The child. It is an act of such profound moral confusion that Hans's world tilts on its axis. The hate is instantly powerless. The indoctrination is shattered. It is a lie. Everything is a lie. This single act of medical ethics is more devastating than a bomb. It is the end of his world. He looks at the medic's face. And, for the first time in his life, he sees not a Jew, not an American, not an enemy. He sees a man. And then the morphine hits. And he falls into darkness. The policy was not born of kindness. It was born of brutal, cold mathematics. It was born from World War I. It here asterisk was perfected by the U.S. Army Medical Department. The goal was not to be nice. The goal was to return the maximum number of soldiers to the fight. Or, barring that, to save the maximum number of lives. To do that, you had to remove emotion. You had to remove nationality. You had to remove rank. A general with a flesh wound waited. A private with an arterial bleed was first. It was that simple. The system was called triage. And it had categories. T1 immediate. These were the sucking chest wounds. The arterial bleeds. The airway obstructions. Men who would die in minutes without help, but had a high chance of survival if they got it. T-T2 delayed. These were the serious wounds. The broken femurs. The major flesh wounds. The burns. They were in agony. They needed help. But they were not going to die in the next hour. T3 minor. The walking wounded. Broken fingers. Shrapnel in the arm. They could wait. And then there was the last category. The one no one spoke of. T4 expectant. The men who were going to die. The massive head traumas. The multiple penetrating abdominal wounds. The men who were beyond saving. For them, the only treatment was morphine. To ease the passing. This system was drilled into every medic. It was their religion. It superseded everything. And here was the radical part, the part that broke the German mind. The U.S. Army Medical Department, in its official manuals, stated that this system applied to prisoners of war. A German T1 was treated before an American T2. It was not pity. It was not love. It was policy. It was an expression of an idea that the Third Reich could not comprehend. That a life was a life. That medicine was neutral. It was an extension of the Geneva Convention into the most brutal calculus of war. 4. David Levy, turning his back on Sergeant Peterson, was the hardest thing he had ever done. He could hear his friend cursing him, calling him a kraut lover, a traitor. But David had his orders. He had his training. He had to trust the system. The system was designed to save everyone. He worked on the German boy with a detached fury. He tied the tag to the boy's buttonhole. A T1. He scrawled the morphine dose and time on the boy's forehead in his own blood so the next doctor would see it. Then he stood up. He left Hans in the snow. And he ran to Peterson. He applied a tourniquet. He tagged him. T2. And then he ran on to the next screen on a stretcher. He was being carried. He saw the gray sky. He heard the jeeps. He was at a collection point. There were other wounded. Dozens of them. Lying in neat rows in the snow. And he saw something that confirmed his delirium. There were no sections. There was no German row and American row. It was all mixed. A man in gray-green wool next to a man in olive drab. A man with a coal scuttle helmet on the ground next to him was groaning. An American GI with a bandaged face was sitting next to him silently. A doctor was walking the line. He was looking only at the tags. T1, T2, T3. He was sorting them for the ambulances. He saw Hans's tag. T1. He saw the American next to him. T2. Get this one on the next jeep. The doctor shouted, pointing at Hans. This was the policy in action. It was impersonal. It was efficient. And it was humane. Not emotionally humane, but systematically humane. 4. Hans, this system was a greater shock than any act of individual kindness. Kindness could be a trick, a whim, a personal weakness, but a system, a policy, a set of rules that valued his life above that of an Axis * ally based on medicine. This was unthinkable. The Nazi ideology was built on the exact opposite. It was built on identity, on race, on who you were. An SS officer's life was infinitely more valuable than a Polish civilian's. That was the law. This American law was madness. It suggested that the Nazi worldview was not just cruel. It was illogical, inefficient, stupid. This was the true insult. This was the unraveling. As they lifted his stretcher onto the jeep before the American T2 soldier, Hans felt a profound vertigo. He was not just a prisoner. He was a patient. And he had no idea what that meant. The jeep ride was agony. Every bump in the frozen road sent a lightning bolt of pain through his chest. But the morphine kept him floating. He arrived at a field hospital. It was not a building. It was a city of tents. Massive olive green tents spread out in a muddy field. The smell hit him first. Not the smell of pine and cordite, but the smell of ether, of antiseptic, of gangrene, and death. This smell was the same everywhere. He was carried inside. The first thing he saw was light. Blinding white light from generators. And noise. Not the sound of battle, but the sound of work. Men groaning. Doctors shouting orders. Nurses moving with impossible speed. And the smell of blood. So much blood. He was put on a cot. A nurse was at his side in seconds. She was an American woman. Her services face was hard. Exhausted. She didn't smile. She didn't scowl. She looked at his tag. She cut away his uniform with shears. He was naked. Ashamed. She didn't seem to notice. She was checking the makeshift seal on his chest. A doctor came over. This one needs a chest tube now. Get him prepped. Get plasma running. Hans watched. He was in the belly of the beast. This was the place he expected to be tortured. Where the dark interrogations would happen. The Gestapo had rooms for this. He knew that. He expected the Americans to have them too. Perhaps this was it. This medicine was the torture. They were saving him only to break him later. This was the only thought that made sense. It was the only way his indoctrination could fight back. They were not kind. They were clever. They were diabolical. But the narrative kept breaking. In the cot next to him was an American paratrooper. His legs were mangled. He was quiet. He was also getting plasma. On the other side was another German. An older man from the Volksturm. He was weeping. Silently. The nurses treated them all the same. The same rushed efficiency. The same tired faces. The same plasma. The same morphine. There was no difference. The only difference was the triage tag. The priority. They wheeled him into surgery. A tent that smelled even stronger of chemicals. The doctor spoke read asterisk to him. In broken German. Do. Worst, okay, same. You will be okay. He put a mask over Hans's face. Zoll, Ruckwarts, von Zen. Count backward from 10. Zen. Noon. Act. The world dissolved. The pain was a dull roar. He was in a different tent. A post-op ward. It was quieter. He looked down. A tube was sticking out of his side. It was bubbling in a bottle of water on the floor. He was alive. He had been repaired. The enemy had taken him apart and put him back together. Why? The question was an obsession. It was a physical itch in his brain. Why? A chaplain came by. He was an older man. He spoke perfect German. He offered Hans a cigarette. Hans shook his head. The chaplain lit one for himself. You are a lucky boy, he said softly. Hans said nothing. The chaplain looked at him. He had kind eyes. Not the fanatical eyes of the party leaders. Just tired eyes. Our medics are read asterisk very good, he said. They follow their oath. Not their orders. Hans looked at him. He wanted to ask. Why? Why me? Why not your own? But he couldn't form the words. The chaplain seemed to understand. He leaned in. Because God doesn't check the uniform before He decides, son. And our doctors try to act the same way. This was an answer. But it was an insufficient one. It was too simple. Hans had been taught that the German God was German. That he was on their side. This American God was neutral. Like the medicine. The very idea was filthy. It was weak. And yet it was this weakness that had saved him. He was in that hospital for 3 weeks. He watched men die. Americans and Germans. He watched men live. Americans and Germans. He saw the sheer scale of the American medical operation. The endless boxes of plasma. The warehouses of penicillin. The number of doctors and nurses. It was another kind of warfare. An industrial warfare of healing. His own medics had paper bandages. And no morphine. He realized not only was their ideology a lie, their power was an illusion. They were not going to win. They could never win. This was the true surrender. Not on the battlefield, but services, here. In a warm cot. With an enemy tube in his chest. When his chest tube was removed, he was moved. He was no longer a patient. He was a prisoner. He was sent to a POW camp in France, or maybe Belgium. He didn't know. It didn't matter. The war was ending. He could feel it. The guards were relaxed. The artillery was distant. And moving away from read asterisk them. Toward Germany. The camp was full of boys like him. And old men. The Volkssturm. The Hitlerjugend. The last dregs of the Reich. They were confused. They were angry. And they were hungry. The food here was not like the hospital. It was thin soup. Hard bread. But it was regular. It was enough. And there was no beating. There was no torture. There was just boredom. And wire. The hardliners were still there. The SS prisoners. The true believers. They tried to enforce the old ways. They called Hans a weakling. They saw his scar. His neat surgical scar. They sneered. They whispered that he was a collaborator. That he had traded secrets for his life. Hans said nothing. How could he explain? How could he describe the medic? The triage tag? The policy? It sounded like a fantasy. It sounded like a lie. So he stayed silent. And then, May 1945, the war ended. The guards told them. The Führer was dead. Berlin had fallen. Germany had surrendered. Unconditionally. For many of the men, it was the end of the world. They wept. They raved. Some killed themselves. They ran into the wire. But for Hans, it was just confirmation. His war had ended months ago. In the snow. in that medics' hands. The Americans started a new program. De-Nazification. They showed them films. They marched them past photographs. Photographs from the camps that had been liberated. Auschwitz. Buchenwald. Dachau. Hans saw the bodies. The piles of skin and bone. The ovens. The ashes. This was the truth. The propaganda wasn't just a lie about the enemy. It was a lie about themselves. It was a curtain hiding this unspeakable industrial evil. The system he had pledged his life to. The asterisk shock was profound. He was not just a soldier on the losing side. He was a tool for this. And the people who stopped this were the same people who had saved his life. The moral inversion was complete. The monsters were his leaders. The heroes, or at least the decent ones, were the enemy. He was ashamed. Not ashamed of surrendering, but ashamed of ever fighting at all. When he was finally released. In 1946, he was 17. He looked 30. He walked home. His town was rubble. His apartment was gone. He found his mother in a displaced persons camp. She did not recognize him at first. Then she clung to him. She wept. She asked where he had been. He said, "Prisoner." He never spoke of it. Not really. How could he? How could he explain to her, or to anyone, that he was alive, because an American medic chose to save him before his own comrade? It sounded like a betrayal. A betrayal of his own side's suffering. A betrayal of the memory of his father at Stalingrad. So he kept silent. The war for him was not a memory of flags and hate. It was services, the memories of a medic's face. The smell of sulfur. And the confusing shame of unearned survival. The American policy of triage had saved his body. But it had annihilated his soul. And in the ashes of the Third Reich, he had to find a way to build a new one.